Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you here on a night when it's not actually raining. I understand it's going to be warmer though by the weekend. Thank you for coming to this meeting, and I'd like to welcome 3 residents from Remenham who came to our last meeting, but this time they're sitting around the table with us, and that looks like it's metaphorically as we're in here, but they are going to be allowed to speak tonight as it's the only item on the agenda. We've had apologies from Mike Smith and Bill. Are there any other apologies? No. Minutes of the previous meeting. Page 5, can we have a look through them, please? Page 6, 7, 8, 9. Sorry, Rachel.
Yeah, at the last meeting, we agreed a particular form of words that would go in the licensing policy with regard to the Get Me Home Safe campaign, and I can't see those in the minutes, so I wonder if we could include those. So it was some wording that Kieran suggested, and we honed it a bit, and then we agreed it. So I think it would be good to have that actually stated in the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Did you get that, Lucia? Yeah, thank you. And page 10. Are you happy that I signed the minutes? Thank you. Any declarations of interest? We have no questions from members of the public. Do we have any member questions? Right, our only item on the agenda for this time's meeting is the cumulative impact assessment for Remenham. Remenham members are going to speak, and I'd like them, before they speak, to introduce themselves, please. Kieran, did you want to start?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide essential background information for the Council's consideration of initiating a cumulative impact assessment for Remenham under the Licensing Act 2003. And the information presented within this report is derived from the Section 182 statutory guidance that's associated with the Act. Cumulative impact refers to the potential impact on the licensing objectives due to the concentration of licensed premises in a specific area, and such concentration may lead to issues around public nuisance, crime, disorder, or public safety concerns. The Licensing Act 2003 recognises the need for local authorities to address these issues through the adoption of cumulative impact policies. Key considerations for any cumulative impact policies are the evidence of impact. So councils should collect and analyse any evidence demonstrating that the cumulative impact of licensed premises in an area is causing or likely to cause problems relating to the licensing objectives. There needs to be consultation, so effective consultation with relevant stakeholders. That will include the police, local residents, parish councils, businesses, licence holders, and any other relevant authorities. And it's crucial when considering a cumulative impact policy. It ensures a comprehensive understanding of local concerns and potential solutions. The Council should clearly define the geographical scope of a cumulative impact policy, specifying the areas where the policy may apply and detailing the licensing activities covered. A cumulative impact policy relies on a presumption of refusal, where it includes a presumption of refusal that new applications within that designated area, they will be refused unless the applicant can demonstrate that granting a licence will not add to the cumulative impact. There is a need for a cumulative impact assessment to take place before the council can take any type of steps towards a cumulative impact policy or not. The 182 guidance provides an outline to the steps of publishing a cumulative impact assessment. So following the statutory guidance, we would need to identify concern about crime and disorder, public safety, nuisance, or protection of children from harm. Consider where there is good evidence that crime, disorder or nuisance is occurring, whether there are activities which pose a threat to public safety or the protection of children from harm. And if there is evidence that such problems are occurring, identify whether these problems are being caused by the customers of licensed premises or that cumulative impact is imminent. Identify boundaries of the area where problems are occurring. And like I said, consult with those people specified as a statutory consultation relevant to a cumulative impact assessment. For the purposes of the consultation, we would need to look at the reasons why it would be considering publishing a cumulative impact assessment, a general indication of the parts of its area which it's considering describing within that assessment, and whether it considers the assessment will relate to all premises licenses or variation applications or a particular kind of license. Subject to the outcome of the consultation, we'd need to include and publish details of a cumulative impact assessment, including the evidence in support of the assessment and the particular kinds of premises the assessment relates to. Licensing authorities are not restricted to the use of general terms. We would need to summarise the licensing authority's opinion in licensing cumulative impact in the licensing policy statement, and the summary within the licensing policy statement would need to include those geographical area, the nature of the problems that have been identified and the evidence associated with it, the types of premises that it's described within that assessment, and the types of applications for which it would be which would be likely inconsistent with the licensing authority's duty to promote licensing objectives to grant any of those applications. So this report provides some of the background around considerations for a cumulative impact assessment. The guidance is included here from the Section 182 guidance. The undertaking of a cumulative impact assessment, it will ensure a thorough and evidence-based decision-making process to maintain a balance between promoting licensed activities and safeguarding the well-being of communities. The Council's consideration of conducting a cumulative impact assessment is perhaps a proactive approach to potentially addressing some of the issues arising from the concentration of licensed premises in Remenham during those summer periods. The Licensing Committee, upon hearing a future report concerning the findings of the cumulative impact assessment and the statutory consultation, they may then be presented with a decision on whether or not to publish the cumulative impact assessment to form the special licensing policy for the area. The recommendation for members this evening is to consider the request for a cumulative impact assessment for Remenham, and we are joined by guests from Remenham Parish Council who've submitted the request for a cumulative impact assessment as part of our statement of licensing policy consultation earlier this year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kieran. Can I ask if there are any questions from members of the committee first of all? Michael.
Yeah, just a very quick question, I think, to start it off with. If a cumulative impact assessment is actually granted, when can that be done? Because obviously you've got it won't be for the events this year, presumably, because a tight deadline, presumably, but no doubt you can confirm that.
The approach we would have to take about a cumulative impact assessment would take us through the events within the Remenham area for this year. We would be able to look to any evidence from previous years, but in particular we would have to have officers present through the variety of events that have been held in that Remenham area over this period of time. I would propose that we would go out, gather that evidence, make use of the safety advisory group meetings that we're part of as a licensing authority, and I would propose that we would handle a statutory consultation post that exercise. So it would take us, the assessment itself would take us all the way through the summer months, and then a consultation would be published with those findings however those findings are presented from the different authorities and residents and businesses, the views of the businesses themselves. And then that consultation would probably run for around the sort of 6 to 12 week mark post the summer. So it would likely take a good proportion of time. It would certainly take all of the summer for the assessment, and then the consultation exercise itself would probably take a couple of months post that summer. So it'd probably take, the reality is, an assessment coming before yourselves as a committee with the findings of that assessment and the findings of consultation. The likelihood is it'll come probably around January, March next year for the scope of work that would be involved.
Sarah.
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure I'm totally clear on what our role as a committee is in this. So, because the recommendation tonight is to consider the request, is it actually our decision to decide whether to embark on doing the assessment? So actually there's a decision to be made. I just want to double check that. And then let's say we decide, let's say that is the case and we decide to do that, then just checking, we've got the report to come back. And is it our decision as to whether we feel that a policy needs to be in place for that? Is it, and it's this committee's decision to do that, or are there any other roles for this committee in this particular situation?
So we ran a public consultation on the statement of licensing policy, where we've taken out this request because it is quite an in-depth, it's quite a large ask of the licensing authority. I think that probably came through in the answer to my first question. It is quite a significant ask. And will take a lot of resources, not just of the licensing authority, but the ASB officers and environmental health officers that are also present. And it will also require some work and engagement from the police to provide back. And we do have those areas in place for the safety advisory group meetings, but it is a proportionate amount of work and resources for the licensing authority. So it's come from the statement of licensing policy. It's a large ask, and the request here is from Remnant Parish Council for the authority to go ahead and undertake the cumulative impact assessment, which is effectively a year's worth of work for the licensing authority. And they're here today, and they've got the points that they want to bring forward to the council to help make a decision this evening. The cumulative impact assessment, the cumulative impact policy, it's got its own democratic process, which is drawn into this report. So there can be a cumulative impact assessment, and then there's a cumulative impact policy. The findings of this assessment that would then be brought back to the committee, and you would have the findings of that assessment. You then at that point will be informed of your decisions on whether or not you want to publish that assessment and make it a special licensing policy. It may be the case that following a cumulative impact assessment, it could also be the case that a policy would not be the appropriate way, because it might open up the areas of problem solving, which would just identify the areas that we would need to find solutions in the areas that crop up. So it's quite a considerable way off in terms of making decisions around policies and assessments. The ask this evening is from the parish council to undertake an assessment, and then the assessment, should we go ahead with it, will be brought back at a later date. And on that assessment, you decide whether or not there should be a policy, or whether or not we can solve issues that are presented within that assessment in an alternative way.
Thanks. And just to be clear, we're making the decision tonight as to whether to embark on the assessment. Yep, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Neil, do you want to add to that?
Thanks, Chair. Just to elaborate a little bit further as well, in the event that the assessment came back and there was a recommendation for a cumulative impact assessment to be made part of the policy, then I think it would be the licensing committee would decide on whether or not the assessment was such that it needed to be included in the policy. But decisions of what goes in the licensing policy are ultimately for council. So it would be for this committee at that point, if it was of that view, to then put a report up to council to recommend to council that the policy is then amended to reflect that assessment. So hopefully that just adds the, if like the very final destination of this.
Thank you.
Abdul.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at page 12, it says consider whether there is a good evidence or not. I'm just wondering, other than those gentlemen here, so the party involved, would the Thames Valley Police, Environmental Health and Highway, will you gather all their information? Thank you.
Yes is the short answer, but to draw that out, for example, when we run through the Henley Royal Regatta with the forward planning, we have leads from the police and relevant departments within the police force, whether that's transport, the transport traffic side of things, the licensing and event emergency planning from the police, as well as the actual superintendent who be in charge of the operation itself. It's quite a well-resourced policed operation. We then have all those businesses that will all have their own say in terms of what their exposure is to crime and disorder. We would then have our own council departments, emergency planning, highways, like you say, waste, and we also have road, street traffic management from the council side of things as well. So there is perhaps quite a significant amount of input from lots of different agencies, lots of different organisations, some of them from the council side of things, some of them outside of the council, environmental health departments and police and so on. It would be a relatively wide consultation exercise, yeah.
Rachel.
Thank you. It's clearly quite a resource intensive exercise. Do you have any assessment for us of the overall cost for Woking Borough Council in terms of resources, to put it into perspective for us?
A lot of the forward planning for Henley Royal Regatta is already costed within the service. So we function with that as it stands. We would expect that the service itself would be able to achieve with the ask, and the reason for that is because we're quite significantly involved with the Henley Royal Regatta. So it's expected that I couldn't provide you with the cost of it all, but there is a reality that we're so involved with the management of this and overseeing this event that the two potentially go hand in hand. I hope that can answer your question.
Pete.
Have we done an assessment before?
As a council, we've not done an assessment before now.
Jackie.
How many days, weeks does this take?
I think the reality is it would probably take around a year to get an impact assessment in place. We've got the events over this summer where we would gather information, and then there's following the summer period, there'd then be a consultation exercise, which may take around 1 month or two. And then for the timings of when committees are held, the reality is it would probably take us around 9 to 12 months.
Neil, did you want to add to that? Okay. Shahid.
Question I think everyone is asking is about value for money. So it's resource intensive, time consuming. We're not sure. I think the answer to the question, which I should ask how much is going to cost, we're not sure. I think that no one of us want to be in the situation where it has costed us X amount, whatever the X amount is, and then we get nothing at the end to show for it. end of the day, every pound we spend has to be accounted for, and we need to make sure that we are getting value for money. How can, as a committee, be assured that that will be the case, because we are being asked to give a go-ahead to consider this?
Obviously, very, very intelligent question. My response to that really would be perhaps not to look at a cumulative impact policy itself. The outcome and the processes that are involved in this may shape it to a cumulative impact policy. But if we take that as if we remove that as a goal, which ultimately it's to conduct an assessment, then that type of assessment may provide opportunity in terms of identifying the issues that are around the Remenham area. And if we carry out an assessment and then that leads us into it as an authority for making improvements in terms of safety of the events that are being held, or reducing crime and disorder within the area for that event, and it's used in an assessment approach to look at problem solving, then I think the outcome in terms of conducting an assessment such as this, the outcome could still be quite a gold standard and value for money of the service, because the outcomes could lead to solutions in different ways. It may not be the case that we have to achieve a policy to implement any changes that might be needed in terms of safety, the safeguarding of the licensed events for the community or the business owners. So I think, you know, it may be the case that it's the goal might not be for a policy in the end, but it could serve a purpose in terms of making improvements for the events that are in the area.
Chair, can I come back on that one? I'm just thinking that is it possible to have a shorter version of assessment so it doesn't cost a huge amount, but gives us some indication to say, yes, it is worth going ahead with it for a further detailed assessment? At least we had some, idea. I'm just concerned that we can spend a lot of time and effort, but we may not get anything at the end. In certain other areas, we have some prototypes, right? So I'm just thinking loudly here, whether some sort of shorter version can be done, which is less resource intensive, less costly, but nevertheless is worthwhile doing it, which gives me indication, it gives us indication that yes, actually there's a room to be further explored here.
I think it's it would need whether we do it fully and properly and transparently in perhaps the most appropriate democratic way. It would then give the committee direction to make decisions, and if we didn't do it in what would be the proper way, then we remove we remove the aspects of consultation. We effectively remove your ability to make the decisions later on. So if we went ahead and did an assessment that wasn't under a cumulative impact assessment, you could still end up with something similar. You could end up with a report. An option could be to do a report, have a report to committee after the summer period, and then make a decision later on. But it does stretch to a case of, well, if we're going to be doing similar levels of work, then it may be more satisfactory to allow the committee to have a decision at the end of that. So to have a cumulative impact assessment and then have a decision later on whether or not you want to publish it or not. So there would be less. There could be less to achieve from not doing this in the proper manner that's proposed within the report, I would say.
Sarah.
I'm going to ask a cheeky question. Has there been any conversation with Remenham Parish Council about them helping with some of the burden of cost?
We have not had those conversations as an authority, no.
That specific point.
No, can you just hang on and I'll bring you in then?
So just to finish off, it might be a conversation worth having, given the financial constraints that the council's having to work in at the moment with the current financial climate. It might be worth having that conversation. And because the other thing I'm a little bit concerned about is the amount of resource required for part of the borough. What does that do to other areas that need licensing activities? And I'm worried about the disproportionate nature. So if there is some kind of arrangement that could be made that would help with payment of a little bit extra resource to help with the team for this, that might solve that problem. And I'm getting some nods from over there. So that might be a conversation worth having that could solve this problem.
And lastly, Pete.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Is there any risk with third parties not wanting to be involved with the cumulative assessment? So, for example, the police might say, yeah, we'll do it, but they're resource constrained as well, so they don't actively take part. That's my first question. Second question is probably for you, gentlemen, is why have we not learned any lessons from previous events that could then be taken on board so we didn't have to go through the assessment process?
I believe the police would engage with the cumulative impact assessment. We have had a debrief from the previous Henley Royal Regatta, and there was a series of recommendations and requests asked for the safety advisory group around different security measures for this year's event. So I believe the police would be well engaged with this, and they have there has been incidents associated with the area in terms of crime and disorder at some of the licensed venues. I believe that the police would absolutely engage with this. They wouldn't be quiet on that, and they have been vocal in terms of their feedback for the festival last year.
Just a point, I gave the police as an example, but there's other third parties, there's businesses, maybe Oxford Council or whatever.
I think from experience through the SAG process, it's relatively well attended. People are involved with it. In terms of steps to improvement for the event itself, we've seen steps of improvement since Wokingham separated from the PPP, and we've seen some improvement around medical provision for the event, and we've seen some improvement around centralising the license holders with emergency services, and then providing radio communication in a central hub type way. So we are taking leaps forward. The groups that are involved with it and the Royal Regatta, they contribute to a fund which pays for their security costs, for their medical provision, for the food and waste, and there's obviously costs around the traffic management. So it's quite well engaged. We have, police, fire, the Environment Agency. So I would expect good feedback if we ran a consultation.
Thank you. Members, you've had your say, and so I'm going to go to our Remenham guests now. Before you speak, could you please introduce yourselves? And thank you for coming, and it's a pleasure to sit round the table with you, and we can thrash this out tonight. Who's going first?
Thank you. And Chair, I know I speak on behalf of everybody here from Remenham that we really appreciate this open conversation. This has been a problem that's been developing for a very long time. My name is Ron Emerson. I live in the centre of Remenham, right in the middle of all of that. And this month it'll be exactly 30 years since I've been there, which is part of the issue in that during that time, events have moved from 2 or 3 a year to over 20. And we now have around 160 days of events during the year. And most of that, or a lot of that, is the setup and takedown of these events, which is actually the biggest problem in terms of disruption, major disruption, but also pollution, which we are very concerned about. There's a major carbon footprint in Remenham as a result of these events. We'll say more about that later, but I'm Ron Emerson, and I'm part of the Residents Association that submitted this.
My name is Michael Dudley, and I'm representing here the Parish Council. I'm also a member of the Remenham Farm Residents Association, and I was a signatory to the original licence that was granted to the Copus Partnership in 2007. And that licence then became the framework for the Rewind licence. And I sat in this room probably about 10 years ago when there was an application made by Rewind to have the licence in their own right. This was granted despite a lot of opposition from ourselves. That licence was then challenged because they didn't comply with it. And again, on 2 occasions. So we haven't just come to you and saying, oh, well, here it is. We didn't like what happened last year. We've had years and years and years of this. And I ask you to say, are you going to let it go on? And or are you just going to say, oh, it's beyond our control? It is within your control to say Remenham has reached saturation point. Thank you.
My name is Neil Brown. I'm the Sprog amongst the three of us, the youngest by miles. I've only been in Remenham for 15 years, but enough time to be involved in many of these. And I'll do an introduction when the chair's ready. Thank you.
I know we've been through this argument before because I was on the licensing committee all those years ago. Any more comments from members before we move?
Aren't they going to get to speak?
Sorry?
Aren't they going to speak?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, right? You want to say something?
No.
No one want to say anything now? Kieran?
Just for the,
I'd like to hear from them.
just for the parish council to say its piece. They've provided some information to the committee in advance of this evening.
Ron, you spoke about money a minute ago. Did you want to bring that up again?
Well, only to say that the parish council has set aside some money for the assessment. So they're certainly prepared to enter into a conversation about providing some funding for this.
Thank you. Neil?
Madam Chair, thank you. First of all, I'll echo Ron's thanks from all of us for you listening to us this evening. To thank you in particular for the progress we've made in the last couple of years, not least thanks to the excellent new officials we've had working with us. And also to thank you for the policy which you endorsed at your last meeting, because it is a significant improvement and it gives us some hope that we can make progress that we think is long overdue. The policy talks about your ambitions and also your appetite for more control over decision making. And we would say that an impact assessment helps you to exercise that control over decision making for your 3 marquee events. I mean, we're struck by the cover of your license and policy and the reference even in the forward to 3 huge events, and which you say rightly are in this borough. In fact, they're not just in the borough, they're only in one of your 14 parishes. And in fact, they all take place in 2 square miles of one of your 14 parishes, and that's where we happen to live. But it's also a place where we're not only lucky enough to live, it's a place which is effectively a rural area, and it's an area which the public use a lot to come down to the river, and the events that occur, not just these 3 main events, but the other hundreds, have an impact on not only our enjoyment of the area, but the general public's as well. The Henley Festival, I guess, is the least problematic for us because, as you know, it's sited effectively where the footprint of the Stewards enclosure is at the end of the regatta course, and it's pretty self-contained. Of course, many of the people coming to it use public transport. Much of the equipment is in situ for the whole of the year, or it can be brought in from Henley. The regatta is, in some respects, the same. Much of the equipment's there in situ all year long, so it doesn't impact the local community. Most of the heavy equipment that's brought in can be brought in from Henley side. The difference, of course, is that the many thousands who attend mainly come by car. And so we have, thanks to the help of your officials, a very good system for getting people in and out during Regatta Week. But of course, for any of you who, from Henley look across to the Stewards enclosure, that's not the regatta that we experience. The regatta that we experience, and the sports event has never been a problem for us. I'd be hypocritical having competed, having a son who competes, having coached. I'd be hypocritical to say that the Henley Regatta is the problem. The regatta manages its events very well. The regatta is very positive in its engagement with us. But if you look down the regatta course on a weekend, you'll see not just the Henley Regatta enclosure, but you'll see 8 or 9 different sites of clubs and bars. And it's not just that these are on an evening, because the police have done a remarkable job improving behaviour in the evenings, but it's that all of that comes on the single track lanes, which are the only access to the site. So every one of those, and they're huge contraptions. We're not talking marquees pulled up by, people pulling ropes. These are things lifted in by cranes, two-story prefabricated huts, buildings as big as this room, in 4 or 5 places down the regatta course, fun fairs, including massive contraptions, all brought in on the same single track lanes. Now you'll know, because I'm sure you've been there, how many vehicles does it take to close a single track lane? And the answer is 2 cars, but actually 1 van pulling a boat trailer, or it's 1 van pulling a burger bar, or it's 1 articulated lorry or large crane. And so the regatta experience we have isn't the sports event, or isn't what happens at Leander or in the enclosure. It's all of the other stuff. And I'm afraid that our experience is, because of the way the legislation is constructed, and because licensing is permissive, and because it's piecemeal, every time we're faced with an event, then it's looked at in isolation by you, because that's the policy that you've had to apply so far. And when we've pleaded over the years about the cumulative impact of the event, for example, in Regatta Week, it's been out with policy and it's been out with law. And what we have now, we would say, because you've included a cumulative impact chapter in your new licensing policy, what we have now is to look at these things a little more holistically and see the effect. So the effect in our community, and the effect on all the people who enjoy, the public who enjoy access to the river, is that for a couple of weeks before and a couple of weeks after the regatta, so that's more than a month, we have large lorries bringing huge equipment for massive constructions for the 8 or 9 different licensed bars and clubs all the way down to the start. And that hasn't historically been properly catered for by licensing law, because the number of times we've been here to hear, and it's technically correct, that traffic isn't a licensable activity or whatever. What we've always had until now, until the prospect of a cumulative impact approach in your hands, is basically damage limitation. Our relationship, thanks to your officials, with these 3 events has actually been pretty good, even Rewind. And where we can, we negotiate with people directly, with people organising events, we go into mediation. We've paid thousands of pounds to private companies to do the data capturing of the effect of the events because no one will. And so that's the reality of our background in this. And what we have done so far is try to not stop any of those big events, but we've tried to have licenses varied where we could to soften their impact on the immediate environment, of course, where we live. Excuse me, but where other people visit. Remember that the area that we're in, a rural area, no mains water, none of us, no mains sewage, single track lanes, 3 single track lanes are the only access to the main road from Henley down towards Hurley, and the river on one side. You couldn't pick a worse place to have the Rewind Music Festival, a mile from Henley, which is an entirely greenfield operation, and onto which everyone attending, everyone selling something, everyone producing a stage and the equipment and the cranes and the paraphernalia goes in and out on those single track lanes. Rewind is a couple of weeks before and a couple of weeks after. Rewind isn't a weekend festival. It's almost a month's worth of impact. And so what we would ask is that the cumulative impact on those 2 square miles is properly understood, because it is seasonal, but actually the season's April to September, which is about 6 months of the year. So it's for about half the year that this has an impact. So what we've tried to do over the last few years, and the chair's been very generous in referring to us being regulars here. It's not because we love it. It's not because we want to waste your time. What we've tried to do is mitigate the expansions, and 2 things have expanded. The Royal Regatta has expanded. It's longer than it used to be. The Women's Regatta has expanded. Actually, the Royal Regatta expanded to accommodate women's events, but the Women's Regatta goes on, and there's a Veterans Regatta and the Thames, the Town of Visitors Regatta as well. And there are dozens and dozens of other events, and many of them are under license, some of them are under temporary event notices, but the impact is the same. The impact is that on most weekends, so for example, the Women's Regatta, which we've tried to support and work with, without a traffic plan, basically closed down the centre of the village for a weekend. So you add that to the Royal Regatta weekends and to the Rewind weekends, and you have about a month a year when no one can come park up at Remenham and enjoy the river, because the infrastructure, rural infrastructure, is so poor. It's about sheer volume, and it's about sheer volume, notably in Regatta Week, notably in the few weeks over those sort of 3 main events, but actually throughout the whole of the season. And on fragile rural infrastructure, it doesn't take much to have a pretty dramatic impact. So we're encouraged that your policy now says that you will view public nuisance in its widest sense. We're encouraged that you have a cumulative impact policy. And what we want to do in proposing an assessment is to help you make a decision at the end of this summer season, which is an informed decision. So in terms of timings, there are 2 windows of opportunity to gather data and to understand the impact, and they start next month. And if this window of opportunity is missed, then we're a year behind, and we have another year. And during that year, we have the possibility of us being back here, because applications will come before you for other events. And we will come and say, but look at the cumulative impact, and we'll be in a spiral of not being able to break out of that sort of decision loop. So as you've heard, we're trying to move the impact assessment forward, so and we're prepared to support it, so that a huge amount of the data that's captured for the main events already can be utilised. I think certainly our experience of having worked closely with Kieran's team and the organisers of Rewind and the Royal Regatta in particular is that much of the data is captured and exists. So let's use that data to inform your decision making. And in relation to all the other events that happened during the year, we've been capturing the data and we're certainly happy to provide it. And hopefully it won't be too onerous a task. What we're trying to do is I guess, damage limitation. What we're trying to do is help you make in the months ahead an informed decision to take control and to decide whether you share our view, which is actually that our small 2 square miles is pretty much at saturation point. And my last comment really is in relation to timing. If you do the cumulative impact assessment, which we would encourage you to do, and if I were one of the people that we've had to deal with who's trying to make money out of the area, I would be throwing licenses in straight away, applications in straight away to get them done before the end of the assessment. So our encouragement would be that you consider that in terms of an assessment, not to roll back on existing licenses, but to prevent further expansion, certainly until the assessment's complete, and when you can make an informed decision. We're very happy to have any other questions, and I know that my colleague Ron has information about RPC spending and the project work they're doing. Thank you.
Yes, go on.
Point I'd like to make is that many years ago, we had a great deal of problems with the amount of noise that was taking place during Henley Royal Regatta, the amplified sound. And we approached the Wokingham Borough Council to say, please, can you help us? It fell totally on deaf ears, totally and utterly on deaf ears. So what did we have to do? We commissioned a professional sound report for the entire days of Henley Royal Regatta for 3 years. We then presented that report to Wokingham Borough Council and to the licensing holder. And since that time, it's monitored by them and we've had no problems. We did exactly the same with the Rewind Festival. We monitored that for 2 years. Now Wokingham monitor that. So we haven't just sat back and done nothing and say, it's your problem. It was our problem and we did our best to sort it. Now we're saying to you, please don't throw any more of those problems at us.
Can I just add a word of encouragement here? And following on from Neil's comments, the fact is we can do things within the existing licensing law to improve things. And last year was a good example because we were seriously concerned with the Rewind event that there was no traffic management. The management of that organisation refused to put in proper traffic management as we have with Henley Regatta, as Neil has mentioned. So we came to this committee with a challenge on the basis of public nuisance, because I certainly sat on that lane for 1 hour because 2 articulated lorries on a single trailer came together because no one had managed it and neither of them could reverse or turn around. So a whole hour. And my neighbour had to take his wife home who was due to go to hospital. We solved that. We came, we challenged it, and they were required to implement proper traffic and spend the money. Basically, it's as simple as that. They didn't want to spend the money, and they did, and it improved things dramatically without any change in the license. It was a variation to the extent of public nuisance. They were required to do this, but that was within the existing laws. So there are things we can do. We just discussed yesterday, given that there is no bus services to and from Remenham at any time during the year, and therefore everyone arrives by car and taxi. Well, the event organisers couldn't have some sort of park and ride system where they bus people in rather than thousands of cars, because just coming back to the point, we are very concerned about the carbon footprint, and we know you have a climate emergency policy and a committee, and I attended it last week. We think this is an emerging issue that wouldn't have existed or been talked about 10 years ago, but it concerns everybody now. So we would like to wrap that in some debate in terms of the assessment, not just of public nuisance and disruption, whatever, but in that, given you've said that you will interpret this in the widest possible sense. And that, by the way, was endorsed by 2 High Court rulings in the previous 2 years, where public nuisance can be interpreted by councils as widely as possible. Will this include pollution, actual air pollution, which is damaging to public health apart from anything else? So I think there seems to be lots we can do within the existing frameworks, as well as looking at what a cumulative impact policy would allow us to do further.
Thank you, and thank you for coming and putting so succinctly what your concerns are. I'm going to do something unusual now, and that's ask members of the committee if they've got any questions for you before we get to making a decision. Jordan.
Sorry, bit of an awkward angle here. I'd like to share best comments and thank you for sharing your views with us this evening. I'd heard a referral to a sum of money that the parish council had set aside to assist with the impact assessment. Do you have a value that you could share with us for that sum of money?
Yes, and it was only decided, I think, this last week. It was £10,000. We don't know if that would be material or not, but what it says is there's a conversation to be had.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Shahid.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. I think this was really, I found it very useful to get the background and context as well. So I'm just want to sort of, for sake of clarity and my understanding, what you're asking is for the complete, fully assessment. So from out of that, hopefully will come all the issues which you've highlighted and probably something which will be quantifiable. And then based on that assessment, we can find a way forward what should be done. So that's your, basically what the recommendation is. So that's what you're asking for the committee to consider.
Yes, please.
Sarah.
It's actually more question for Kieran, but just based on that, the report that this committee gets back at the end of this, will it include, oh, sorry. Okay. When this report comes back to us, should we say go ahead with it? Will it include possible cumulative solutions, if that makes sense? Is that the scope of what could be in this? So a suggestion was just made there for possibly some kind of park and ride system. Whether that's something that's right or not is another matter. But could the report include solutions like that would apply to any license, people wanting to get a license for an area? And is that actually something that could be done within licensing law?
Personally, I would like to use it in that way. So I would like to, if you go ahead with an assessment, an angle from me in terms of assisting those people that are involved with the event is to try and bring people together and look for solutions. The report itself, I'm not sure if the report will scope into solutions themselves, because sometimes it can be quite complicated and complex, and there's money involved in certain ways, and there's different landowners, and it may be the case that there are problems that are there that might not be solvable or might not be solvable easily. But certainly what I'd expect from the assessment is to draw out areas that might need to look at for solutions. So I would want to see from an assessment a concentration of some of the issues that's there during the Remanen event with a view to looking at solutions. Absolutely.
Thank you. And just for context, the reason why I know that's a very specific thing, but I'm hoping that if we do agree to go ahead with doing this assessment, that this is seen as a way to, it's not seen as a way of just stopping activity. It's seen as a way to have that conversation, to look at how we can enable solutions, if that makes sense. So seeing it's a positive thing rather than being viewed as something restrictive. Does that make sense?
Michael. Oh, sorry, Neil, did you want to speak? I'll bring you in turn.
Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Michael.
Me, okay. Oh, there, yeah. My thanks to Ron, Neil and Michael on that. I found that very, very interesting. I'm actually in a unique position. I actually work in Henley. And I used to have an office very near and I could see the church outside my office window. So I do know that goes along the long bank because it happens to be a nice straight bit of river, hence that's why you've got the regatta there. But I don't think no one's really mentioning that Henley Royal Regatta is one of the biggest sporting events this country has as well. And it is an impact on a village of, was it 500 properties, I believe. So it does have a huge impact. What I just want to know is, we just seem to be talking about an event. Do you have issues with every single event that occurs there? Because it's not just the Royal Regatta, you've got Rewind and others. That would be useful to, I think that's, if that's what you're trying to get at as well, that would, I would find that useful.
Yeah, sorry,
Let me answer it. Michael.
which one of you? Michael, you or Neil?
So in order, in terms of impact on us, Rewind is the worst. And Rewind is the worst because of where it happens. Because everything to set up, to run, and to take down a major international music festival goes down single track lanes through a rural area. In terms of the regatta, the impact on us isn't the regatta itself. It's all of the other commercial activity which attaches itself to that, to the regatta during the regatta week. So it's the fun fairs, it's the bars, it's the nightclubs, which other people under other licenses set up. And they're the ones which are all happening downriver of the regatta stewards enclosure, and they're the ones which have a significant impact. We can tell you that weeks before the regatta, where the traffic jams will be, and that the lanes will be closed effectively for the whole time. So it's not. So I think it's important to distinguish between the regatta, the sporting event, even the organisation of the regatta, and all the other hangers-on events that happen all the way down the course. But because of the way the licensing system is constructed, it's very hard. It's been very hard for us to make the case in relation to those other events. That's why, in relation to that week, I think there's a special case for cumulative impact.
Yeah. I mean, I know that Rewind follows the regatta, so immediately after, and it kind of follows actually in the same site as well, I believe.
That's the Henley Festival. The Henley Festival is the week after regatta. Yeah, it has very little impact on the village, except the ingress of traffic, because the equipment's already been set up, and many people travel by public transport to the Henley Festival. The Rewind Festival is a month later, and it's down at Temple Meadow, a mile away, in a genuine greenfield site, and that's the one that has the biggest impact.
Yeah, that's one near Temple Island then.
Yes.
It's a long way down, yeah.
Exactly. And just to answer your question, I think as well as being piecemeal, the licensing system until now has been permissive. And what we would say is that we are at saturation point, and that one of the attractions for us, should you conclude, having conducted an assessment, that you need to have a cumulative impact policy, because a saturation policy, then the effect of that would be to reverse the presumption of granting new licenses, but to require others applying for those licenses to show you that they won't add to the cumulative impact. And so that's the way we see the policy you're proposing as helping us to mitigate the impacts.
Thank you.
Could I just add another statistic to get some sense, because you've seen what happens along that stretch, and we've quoted this before, but it's probably worth saying again. During the events, during those summer periods, but pretty well half the year, a number of people descends on this 2 square miles equivalent to the entire population of Swansea or Coventry, more than the population of Newcastle, all descend here. And it's that huge scale of activity that we're trying to mitigate in this. As I say, within the existing license, we've shown you can do things. We're here to talk about containing that in terms of saturation. Could I just get a point of clarification, Kieran, on your submission at the beginning, where you talked about presumption of refusal? Just for clarification here, you say presumption that new applications within the designated area will be refused, etc., etc. Does new applications, will that include variations on licenses?
So it, as part of the assessment, the impact assessment, it would be to identify the types of licensed premises. So so I worked for a council in Hounslow, and they introduced a cumulative impact assessment for a part of their town centre, but specifically on off licenses. There was a lot of street drinking there, there was a lot of crime associated to it. So they identified off licenses as being an area if they wanted to refuse those applications. So as part of an impact assessment, we would be looking at the types of licenses that are issued. What's really interesting about Henley, and it's relatively unheard of in event management up across the country, is as authorities, the dynamic normally is the case you're dealing with the one license holder. If you compare it to like Reading festivals and nearest major event, they're dealing with one license holder. With the Henley Royal Regatta, there's the regatta themselves, and then a multitude of licenses, either on premises licenses or on temporary event notices. And what we're doing so we use the SAG. We basically use a safety advisory group. We bring all these different people together, and then we try and encourage those licenses to combine their own resources. So it's a really interesting dynamic, and it does make progress, but in anything with a collaborative approach, it takes time, and we are seeing improvement. We're already seeing improvement within the last couple of years, and you're quite right that the Residents Association have made use of applications to review for Rewind Festival and so on. So in terms of the answer to that, as part of the assessment, we would make the assessment itself would identify whether it be new licenses or variations to existing licenses, or both, in terms of that saturation policy. There was a point you made, Neil, which I wanted to come back on, was around how in between any assessment being completed and any decision around policy, that there is likely to be new or variation license applications, and that's because we're taking an approach as an authority now to move some of those premises users who are on the temporary event notices. We're encouraging them to make use of actual premises licenses. So over the course of this year, we're going to see them still using those TENs for this year because of the relationship that needs to be had. But we may be looking at them applying for new or variations to their existing licenses, and that would be an individualistic approach to that type of consultation through this process. I think part of the discussions around cumulative impact assessment essentially plays a role in encouraging those conversations, which then also encourage the licensees and the residents to have that piece where they're brought together through the democratic process in terms of having a say on the individual licenses. So again, another benefit of taking an impact assessment is the fact that it's going to influence some level of change in local government, because we're going to be seeing several of those temporary event notices potentially change to premises licenses or variations to existing licenses, which again brings democratic accountability. So there's strength to be had in any type of assessment that comes through for the licensees that are there.
Can I just reinforce a point there, Kieran? There was one event organizer that used rolling TENs to stage a 30-day event, which had no controls. The other licenses, the Copaz license, Rewind license, we have sound level controls, decibel limits. There were none with this, and we measured the decibel outputs, and they were way in excess of the other controlled areas. But they were allowed to do that because they used rolling TENs to stage something that should have had a license to stage for 30 days.
Yes, and it may be the case that a cumulative impact assessment establishes the use of temporary event notices and how they've been used as with the authority, and it may be the case that any future policy recognises that the use of temporary event notices need to be avoided in that type of area. So, but
Thank you. That's the end of our agenda. Well, it was going to be the end of our agenda till Pete puts his hand up.
You missed me out because I did put my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Pete. Yeah.
I've just got a bunch of stuff, so my apologies. First one really is about traffic management. So having recently reviewed some planning applications, and in those planning applications, extremely detailed traffic management plans, is this not done for the events in Remnant? That's my first question. I do have others.
The answer is yes. However, and we've worked very closely with council authorities and with organisers and with their consultants who manage traffic. But when you're moving in Rewind's case, 30,000. I mean, it's just very, very difficult to do. So what we've done is make considerable improvements in all three cases. The regatta, I think, was actually the best of the three. And that's why, in relation to that aspect of data, it's all captured, all the information is known. The difficulty, one of the questions earlier was, is any event not an impactful? And the answer, I'm afraid, when you've got a single track lane, is that any event is impactful. So we know on a Thursday night it's dog training at the village hall, because if you're driving home, there are 10 cars coming the other way. That's just how it is, and we accept that, and that's not unreasonable. But there is an impact of absolutely every event. Our point is that the big events, we've been able to work with organisers, with your excellent officials, to mitigate that for traffic management. With all of the other events, then we need a more holistic approach. And maybe the question with the data in is, are we at a point where we can't really have any more? Given the infrastructure, because the one thing that can't change is the infrastructure. The one thing that can't change, and that we can't, and we've done our best, working out one-way systems and reverse one-way systems and every permutation you can think of. But the one thing we can't do anything about is the geography. We've got a river on one side of the site for Rewind and 3 single track lanes.
Yeah, I was just wondering at the context there, so thank you. With regards to the assessment itself, as you answered my question earlier, that we, as a council, we have not done one. I'm just wondering about the experience of staff to be able to do one, but also staff who know the area. I don't want, say, someone coming up from London to go, actually, it's just the Thames, isn't it? Okay, yeah, we can stick some tents up there. We want someone who actually understands there's a single lane traffic. So that's one concern I have. Cost is another, and I don't really want to approve a blank check. So I don't know how we can put some sort of mitigation into the cost of it. Then also learning from data. If they've got years and years of data, can that be used to actually as an input into the process to actually say, okay, we've got all this data. Can we actually shorten the time frame to something and learn how to measure the data based upon the data they've already got? So we know there's going to be a spike at a particular period. Can we actually go and focus in on that spike and see if we can deal with that?
And I share your view. So what's not proposed is a use of an external firm, and it's proposed to use our own.
Kieran, can you go to?
I'm sorry. I share your view. It's what's not proposed is to use an external firm for this, but to use the existing resources within enforcement and safety. So your ASB officers, environmental health officers, licensing officers. You still can't. Sorry. So I share your view, and the report doesn't propose to use an external body, but to use council's existing officers that are made up from the enforcement and safety team who are familiar with the event, have worked the events. There's so many. Yeah, thank you.
Shahid.
I was just thinking, right, with so much data available to us, years of data, it's been going on for how long now?
Well, we have detailed reports from I think 3 years on the regatta and 2 years on Rewind.
The reason I'm saying is that with so much data, there's so much technology can be used to model this. which gives us very good, accurate analysis of actually before we even do the detailed analysis. And that could feed into that as well. So I'm not sure whether as a council we have looked into that, or do we have the capability to look into it? Because I think there's a lot of good technology available by which you can do a lot of sophisticated analysis based on the data which is got, and have some sort of predictive model saying that potentially this is what could, what could happen in the future as well based on the. So I'm not sure whether we consider that or not.
Yes, we're happy to look at any data that's available in terms of traffic at the site. We'll also look at the police reports from previous years related to the relative festivals that are along the river, and then we will look at the events that are held this summer too. In terms of any impact assessment, there's also a consultation, so we can't necessarily get away from the fact that this will take some time to prepare an assessment in what you would need to make any type of future decisions.
I think, Chair, if I may come back, I think what my experience was when we actually look at these issues in silos, we don't see the cumulative impact. That's what, whether it's a report from the police or report from other things, is silo, it's not cumulative, right? But what I was referring to is when we do a computer model, it looks at all the cumulative impact, and then you see a much better outcome. I think this is the problem we find in everything. Everything is looked at in silos, and we don't get the result which you're looking for. Yes, it works, and this doesn't work. But if there are 10 different things that are impacting this particular scenario, we need to look at the 10 things in one, and that's where the computer modeling comes in. That's what I was referring to.
Okay, thank you. Can I just bring Neil in? Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Just an additional point to Kieran, just make absolutely crystal clear for legal reasons. Is not just the material provided from Revenant and other sources, also the premises licence holders have previously provided data, and that will have to be taken into account as well. So just make that absolutely crystal clear, just in case if I was watching on YouTube, just make absolutely clear that all the data from previous festivals will be taken account of, as well as anything in terms of this year coming forward as well.
Ron.
Coming back to what you can do with data and how much we've got, I had a conversation with an organisation that calculates carbon footprints for events, and this is quite a science now. I mean, they can give you the carbon footprint of a dog. And I told them what we had in the way of data, explained the extent of the events, broad outline, but is this the sort of thing where you could calculate the total carbon impact of these events in a year? And they said, yes, we can. Now, we're not asking Wokingham to do that. If that was something we wanted to pursue, we'd pursue it ourselves. But it is another example of how and when we would use or could use this data to get a better picture of what's actually happening here.
Sarah.
I just was thinking maybe we should be at the stage of maybe making a decision, and I just wanted to make a suggestion of what we may want to vote on. Just thinking about the conversation, I certainly don't have any problem with us saying let's say yes and get get this assessment done and bring it back. I'm just wondering if as part of that recommendation on Pete's point, and that we're not signing a blank check, because we don't actually know what this is going to cost. And my concern is, as I said at the beginning, if it's so resource intensive, what does that mean for other parts of the borough? And are there safety implications for elsewhere as a result, for example? So I'm wondering if we put in some language into that recommendation that says, yes, we're happy to go ahead with this. But I don't know how we would word this. I might need some legal advice here on this about ensuring that we don't put ourselves into financial difficulty through doing that. Or I think Pete might have some wording. Something. Help me out here.
I'm just thinking, because this is the first time we have done such a thing, I would maybe suggest that this comes back as a regular report to this committee or to a scrutiny committee to monitor the progress and the cost of it, so we don't suddenly see actually they're spiraling out of control. We've got to rein it back in. So I don't want to put shackles on you, but I'm thinking we should have a regular monitoring process to ensure it's making forward progress, and the council is happy with that, both from data deliverables and cost wise. I think that would be good for a basis of recommendation.
That's a good idea, I think, in view of transparency of what's going on. So maybe something, well, yes, in principle, we're happy with this. We have regular reports back from a transparency perspective, and it's in provision that there is we don't put ourselves into financial difficulties, and that there's some form of negotiation on some funding available from Remenham Parish Council. I don't think we can actually decide that, but we can ask in our recommendation that we negotiate and have that conversation as part of the recommendation, I believe. So I don't know if there's a form of words there, and then wants to add it, and it's a really long-winded one, but I just want to make sure that we protect ourselves and try and achieve what's being requested here at the same time.
To add to that, I think it's good to use scrutiny as well.
Yes, sorry, I was going to say, from the recommendation point of view, do you want to come back to this committee, which meets every...
It's 4 times a year.
Yeah, which isn't a lot, whereas scrutiny does have a lot of meetings, which gives you a lot more flexibility when you can actually come to it. Then it's a question of which scrutiny committee. I'd say corporate and community.
It's probably not... I wouldn't think it's up to us to decide, and it should be up to scrutiny itself to decide whether it goes to management or corporate and community.
Shahid.
I think in principle, I'll be happy to give it, go ahead, but without giving a blank check as well. So there needs to be some sort of guideline. But yes, scrutiny will be a good idea to check. But also, again, I want to emphasize the point I've made. We've got a lot of information, data available at the moment. And I do believe, with my own personal experience in this as well, that there's a lot of actually groundwork can be done before even you do the assessment, which will give you a good indication of way forward as well. But that means I'm just thinking, and somehow in assessment, Kieran, I'm just thinking if it's worth seriously looking at those computer models with all the data available from all the different angles, wherever they are from, it's not. And that will give us a pretty good idea, at least in reasonably, give us a good start moving forward as well. So I'm just thinking that if we are going to go, obviously it seems like we're going to give a go ahead, but do consider that as part of this as well, because the way I see the assessment is being, what I've heard is a very traditional way of doing assessment. I think we need to move away slightly, be more innovative, and use the other methods which we have available and be more creative and better. And that will actually give us a better value for money as well.
Okay, thank you.
So just in terms of data, the types of information that we're going to be looking at likely is going to be crime data for the area, incidents that has happened during the different events. The licensees themselves, they have incident logbooks in terms of what incidents they've had and how they've managed that. We have a medical angle in terms of the medical provision that's provided and the types of incidents that are the types of occurrences that they've responded to, and then we also have the traffic side of things, which is obviously a huge impact for the residents. So in terms of data and modelling, I'm not too sure how the conversations around climate and so on would be taken account into modelling. That'd be something really fresh for me. But certainly from a licensing perspective, what we're used to making an assessment on is litter and waste from the area. That forms nuisance. The use of traffic management, obviously, and then any medical side and any crime that's been associated to the premises. So the types of information that you get back from an assessment, that's the data that we're talking about. There will be some relevance to obviously the traffic management side, but that's the main aspect of data and information that you're going to get back is crime incidents, medical incidents, any disorder in the area, things that are relevant to the licensing objectives and quite tightly connected to those objectives.
Rachel?
Thank you. So from what Kieran was saying earlier, I think that you were saying that the licensing team can, broadly speaking, do this within its own resources that it currently has. So, and also the licensing team has to basically break even, doesn't it? So the income roughly has to match the costs. So could we, instead of asking the team to do lots more reports on all the costs, etc., could we not just say that the licensing team must report back to us if it is materially going to exceed its budget due to this? Is that an easier solution?
That would be an easier solution. I think this committee quite often steps into a sort of strategic funnel for the licensing section. We're accountable to yourselves. Probably seen that with some of the gambling work that we've done, and in terms of engagement around all the taxi consultations that we've had. I think that would be perhaps sensible. We run licensing committees fairly regularly as well. It is tied to the licensing function, but I'm also happy if we want to add an extra level of scrutiny. I can only we have to follow a democratic process for completing a policy. We're subject to a democratic process in terms of the fee setting. This is going to be additional. There may be some extra cost. There's obviously an offer in terms of funds from the parish council. So if it ends up in a position of where we have overdue scrutiny, then that's fine, and may be useful. May even be useful if we were ever to be challenged on process. So I'm comfortable with how the committee decides.
Jackie?
It's just a very simple one. Are we making a decision with the gentleman here, or are they being asked to leave?
No, we're going to make the
decision with them here. It was with the greatest respect.
Can I just add one? In the spirit of innovation and going about this, it may be possible, and just suggesting it, that we split the task of assessment.
I don't think we could do that because so we would need to carry out the task as a borough council, as a licensed authority. We're making our own decision. It has to be independent, and then it's through the consultation. We're going to ask the police for their data. We're going to ask the ambulance service for their data. We will ask information from you. We'll ask for information from us, and then as part of all of that, we bring it together in terms of an assessment. So we couldn't be colleagues in that way.
But all I meant was you could look to RPC to agree what data they would provide to you.
Absolutely. We would engage through that. For sure.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Okay.
Sorry, one more point. Yeah, I know. I like the voice of my own voice. You mentioned the scope of it earlier there and I'm wondering whether we should also recommend that the scope be well defined, so we don't get feature scope where somebody is a later committee says, have you considered this? And I'd like to see that as part of your initial document. I know you've got this here, but there's going to be, say, did you consider damage to the road due to the heavy traffic going through, and did you consider payment for that damage? The answer to be that's out of scope.
We've come up with some new words for the recommendation, and I think it may be time now for us to hear those words. I
just wanted to, just very quickly, it's scope of the cumulative impact policy. So we would get that in the assessment. So that's not something we need to decide now, because the policy is what comes at the end of the assessment if we decide to go ahead with it. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that.
I think we've asked a fair amount of questions of each other, and I hope everyone thinks that they've had a fair hearing. Before we move to the vote, Neil has come up with some different words for the recommendation. He's going to read them out.
And Chair, just my recommendation for the words of a motion that you could put that maybe meets the spirit of the recommendation in the report is in two parts. The first one is to authorise officers to commence steps to collect and analyse evidence of cumulative impact of licensed premises and activity in the relevant area. And then the second point is to provide regular reports to the licensing committee and overview and scrutiny.
I'd be prepared to propose that. The only thing I'm just wondering about the second part is, are we going to go to scrutiny? And I'm just worried about we're trying to be careful about their resource. Okay, and so I'm happy to propose the first part. The second part, I think we just need to. I think I get both points made by Pete and by Rachel. I wonder if what's better is if maybe we just get a little update at these committees, and then maybe post-exercise, it goes to scrutiny to look at how the process of it went after it's been done, so that we're not overburdening the team. That's what I'm worried about, getting a balance of transparency, but actually meaning you guys can actually do your job as well. I don't know how people feel.
Jackie?
Well, that is my greatest concern sitting here listening to this for an hour and a half. Huge sympathies, but the resources, and at the back here it said that we are for very, very stretched. This council has been for 2 years, 3 years since COVID. It's a huge undertaking, and that concerns me.
Would what Sarah said be satisfactory to you, Neil?
Chair, yes, and legally, and it does occur to me that scrutiny can always pull things in anyway, in any event, and certainly when this sort of thing's been considered before, it's always been using the licensing committee as that method of democratically keeping an eye on progress of things.
Rachel?
I would suggest we remove the reference to scrutiny, because they can always pull it in if they want, and also, you shouldn't really be doing scrutiny after the event, as we always say. So, but perhaps we could add some wording to do in terms of the reporting back, specifically with regard to cost or the budget or something like that to do with the resources.
So, Chair, it could be additional to that, regular reports, including the actual and projected cost of the process.
And the impact on the rest of licensing and activities. I mean, it doesn't need to be a big report, but just to understand if by doing this job, we're actually not serving other areas well enough. That's my concern more than anything, and making sure, because this is about safety, does this put other areas at risk? So just having a brief overview, and it doesn't need to be lengthy, but just for you guys to come maybe to our meetings and just say we're within budget and we're able to manage this, or you can flag and say actually we are struggling over here through doing this, and just to give us early sight of that.
Michael?
Just very quick, I'm happy to second that, Sarah. That was all. You were got a bit worried.
Thank you. Ron?
Just to an earlier point, if you do go ahead with this, are you able, during this assessment, while you're doing it, to freeze licenses at their current level? Because we could end up at the end of the year with 3 more licenses.
Chair, if I can just come in on that. Legally, no, they can't freeze that. I'm sorry. I can anticipate the problem that you're worried about, but no, that isn't possible. And as you explained very fairly, the process ultimately, if there was a cumulative impact assessment, flips the presumption. So again, each new application would have to consult its own merits. But what I would add as well is the law provides for cumulative impact to be taken account of in any new applications in any event, because the problem is at the moment it would have to be objectors to come to the committee on each one to say there's a cumulative impact here. That would be the problem, but no, unfortunately the council could not take up that line, and it would get knocked down very quickly legally if it did.
Okay, I think we've had a pretty good move around that, and I think everyone's had their say. If anyone else wants to speak now or forever, and you know the rest of the words.
It proposed and seconded.
Yeah, it's proposed and seconded. So on the amended recommendation, do you want Neil to read it out again before you vote on it? No? Okay, can I have a show of hands of those in favour, please? Thank you. That's unanimous.
And can we say thank you for all of your consideration, the time you've taken.
You might
We
be
really
fed up with
appreciate
us by the time
We really
we
appreciate it.
finished it, Neil. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Mm. Yes, that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.